The fall 2025 season of Investigation with Dr. T is proudly centering on our institution's newly designated prestigious R1 Carnegie classification. We're seizing this moment to go deeper, think bigger, and highlight the game-changing work that's happening. So each episode this fall is going to spotlight cutting-edge research initiatives, groundbreaking studies, and powerful doctoral dissertations led by PhD and EDD students, research-engaged faculty, field-based research practitioners, and community partners. So we're going to focus on vital sectors like education, criminal justice, human services, while also welcoming special guests from the College of Psychology, College of Dental Medicine, and the College of Computing and Engineering. And join us as we celebrate our journey into R1 territory and explore what it truly means to lead with research, lead with scholarship, and lead with purpose. So stay tuned. Fall 2025 Investigation with Dr. T. It's going to be unforgettable. So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Investigation with Dr. T. As we honor Veterans Week, we pause to recognize the service, sacrifice, and resilience of the many men and women who have worn our nation's uniform. Today's conversation is not only timely, but it's essential, and we're focusing on silent wounds, an empirical study of PTSD among veterans. And joining us tonight are two outstanding guests whose work directly supports our veteran community. First, Dr. Dana Mills, who is the Associate Dean, and I'm going to ask them to come on now. I'm going to spotlight their videos so that I could read their bios. We have Matt Chenworth and Dr. Dana Mills. So Dr. Mills is an Associate Dean of Research and Program Planning and is an assistant professor at the Abraham Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice. Dr. Mills is a researcher whose empirical study sheds new light on the psychological aftermath of service and the often invisible injuries that many veterans carry. His research centers on community-based solutions to complex social issues, with a particular focus on veterans' reintegration and alternative therapeutic approaches. Through grant-funded projects, Dr. Mills is exploring innovative interventions such as scuba diving and simulation-based experiences as potential supports for veterans returning to the workforce. We're also joined by Matt Chenworth, Senior Director of Military Affairs at NSU, is someone on the front lines of supporting veterans as they transition, reintegrate, and thrive in academic life. Matt is a determined and passionate leader with a demonstrated history of working in higher ed with veterans and military-affiliated students to promote transitional assistance, academic excellence, degree fulfillment, and career attainment. So in the spirit of Veterans Week, this conversation serves as both an acknowledgement and action. So thank you, both of you, for being here with me, and I really appreciate your time. I honor your time. I have the utmost respect for both of you. And so I just give you guys a couple of minutes maybe to just sort of say any kind of like opener before I dive into the questions. Matt, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'd be honored to. And just like you highlighted, this is our Veterans Week. And additionally, on top of that, Monday was actually the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. So definitely a special anniversary that we just celebrated. Myself being a Marine, we take a lot of pride in it. But here at NSU, we really take the day and the whole week to recognize and honor not only the veterans, but we also want to pay special attention to those military connected members as well. And this includes, those that are doing commissioning programs that will eventually join the military, but then also the legal dependent and spouses that are a part of that greater military family, because without them really keeping everything concrete on the home front, the warfighter that is on the front lines would not nearly be as successful as we have been. So it's really an honor and privilege that I've been able to fill this role over the past 7 years. And I'm just proud to be at an institution like NSU that does so much for that veteran and military connected population.
Excellent. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your service. And thank you for all of the work that you do. I see you in action every day, doing the work, and so we really honor you and appreciate you. And Dr. Mills.
Yeah, thanks. Certainly happy to be here this evening as well with both you and Matt. I've actually gotten to know Matt pretty well over the last couple of years. He's really an integral part of a lot of the work that I'm doing. And honestly, I'm anxious for him to discuss. Hopefully, he'll have a chance to discuss about some of the resources we actually do have at the university, which are really incredible, and I would argue underutilized. And I don't know if Matt feels the same way or not, but I think it's really important. My connection to the material comes in a couple of different ways. The most immediate is, if I look at my immediate family, so grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, I have about over a dozen, about 15 individuals in my family that are veterans. And so it's including both my grandfathers on both my mom and dad's side of the family. So this has always been an interest of mine. It does seem as though there's a lot of lip service paid to taking care of veterans, but not always a lot of action. And so rather than standing on the sidelines at this stage of my career, I decided let's jump in and actually do something, rather than lament some of the issues that are in place. And so really excited to be here, and hopefully some of the work that we're doing, even if it makes just a small impact, can make an impact on, hey, if it changes one life, then we'll be satisfied. So
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that's my anthem as well. Just one life. It doesn't matter. I don't need a lot of quantity as long as I have quality of the work that we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about your study first, Dr. Mills. Your study takes an empirical deep dive, no pun intended, into PTSD among veterans. What stood out for you? Maybe you can just kind of tell us a little bit about the study and then what stood out to you the most, especially when it comes to symptoms or trends that traditional assessments tend to overlook.
Sure. So really, there's kind of two important things to look at here. And one would be the treatment modality itself. And then the second would be, the identification of symptoms, as you mentioned. So on the treatment modality side, one thing that we know about men in general, I would even take a step back. We're talking, if we look at mental health issues in this country, we're looking at about 60 million people in this country that suffer from some type of a diagnosable mental illness, just in general. Of that 60 million, you get about half that will ultimately seek treatment for it. So there's obviously a huge percentage of individuals that don't. Now, if we start to kind of dissect that a little bit further, we see that men generally don't go to therapy for much of anything. And if we look at veterans who are men, it's a very small percentage. The estimates are somewhere around less than a third will ultimately go to therapy, and then those that don't follow through. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, right? I mean, some are kind of obvious and things that we know about, right? There's kind of a negative stigma attached to it. There's therapy can be difficult to find. There's extremely long wait times, oftentimes, to get in. So there's a whole variety of factors that contribute to this problem. But the way that we wanted to address it in our studies was that the modality, just the therapeutic environment itself, just isn't conducive to being something that individuals that have served in the military are all that receptive to do. And if we think about it, if I ask you to close your eyes and tell me what therapy looks like, we typically will see kind of the proverbial, couch with the person sitting there, and the person on the couch is, expressing all their deep, seated feelings of, how they've been. Men don't do that very well in general. And, the type of person, and not that we want to stereotype individuals, but if you just look at personality types of those individuals that tend to go in the military, these tend to be adventure seekers, guys that really are, have a propensity to try to get involved and engaged in things that create that adrenaline rush. It's a different type of person, not the type of person that's going to be, ultimately comfortable, sitting in a one-on-one environment, reflecting on the way that they feel. And so the first thing that we recognized very quickly was that we needed to develop alternative types of therapy to attract this audience. I'd actually read a book a couple of years ago that talked about alternative therapies for veterans. I thought it was really interesting, but I still didn't think it really captured exactly everything that we needed to do. So when we talk about alternative therapies, some of which likely heard of, right? So things like equine therapy, art therapy, things like mindfulness have gained some traction lately. But these are still therapies that are, all kind of related to that, kind of get quiet and calm and sit in here and be somewhat tranquil. So what we wanted to do was to do something that would be a little bit more reflective of the personality of veterans to kind of get them engaged early on. So one thing that we know about the therapeutic process is it's all about engagement. And if you can engage early on, then people are going to come back. And so that's critical in this environment. So going back about 2.5 years ago, my dean, Dr. Kimberly Durham, hooked me up with this organization of Fort Lauderdale, the Veterans Trust, their director, Fred Roger, and their CEO, executive director, Lee Hediger, both of whom were veterans, and both of whom had a concept that they thought might have some therapeutic benefit. And that concept was using a race car simulator to teach skills that would be related to relaxation and in kind of quote unquote mindfulness. So getting better in touch with with those feelings, but doing so through this venue. Admittedly, at first I thought this was an insane idea. I didn't get it. And very quickly though, it started to make some sense to me. So we assembled a team that had experience in some of these areas. Integral team members are Matt. He's going to be really critical as we start to expand and roll this out further, and through the military affairs department. Then also some fellow academics, Alex Edmonds, who is a colleague of mine in the College of Education. Dr. Edmonds has a background in sports psychology and had actually used race car simulation to work with athletes in the past, specifically, golfers and tennis players. So individual athletes where pressure gets high to try to teach them self-regulation. And so he had a lot of the theoretical background in that area. And Dr. Tom Kennedy, who is an associate dean over in the College of Psychology, he's a clinical psychologist, and he came to us with the deep clinical background. And so that's kind of the three of us really established that team. And the idea was that through race car simulation, without going into a ton of details, you get an individual in the seat of this this is a real simulator. This is not a video game. This is not the type of thing this is not, Forza or, any of those video games that your kids play. This is a simulator that's used in a software application actually that creates the simulated racing environment that's, actually used by professional racers. Okay, so this is the training that these folks in F1 and NASCAR, this is what they use to actually train themselves to be better drivers. We knew that this would be an interesting way to get these guys engaged. And the idea was, hey, come on in. We're going to actually teach you how to drive a car real fast. We're going to get you some training with a professional race car instructor, which we do. And then we're going to actually teach you some skills to make you a better racer. And oh, by the way, at the end of this, we actually have opportunities for you to get out there and get some real race experience on a track, and do ride-alongs and things like that. And so automatically, this sounds a heck of a lot better than, hey, come on in and talk about your feelings. Right? So we get them engaged. They say, wow, that sounds kind of cool. Let's give this a try. So we come in, we give them that race car instruction. So we teach them the basics of racing. The next thing that we do once we have that set is we actually start to hook them up and get some biometric data from these folks. And so we look at their resting heart rate. We look at their heart rate variability. We look at their respiration rate. We look at their how hard they're gripping the steering wheel. So all kinds of biometrics that we take. And then we do a more traditional psychological battery. And it's all in the spirit of, hey, we need this information because what we're going to do is use this to teach you some skills that are going to make you a better driver. So on the biometric side, what you have to do is you have to keep calm. So we're going to teach you different breathing techniques and other stress reduction techniques. So that when you see and feel your stress level getting high, you can actually regulate that on your own. So we go through that and they'll go through the race. We give them feedback on how they did as a driver, but then we also map that with this biometric data that they get. And we tell them, hey, look, before you crash, your heart rate went up. You were gripping the steering wheel too tight. Next time, and they can see this data, by the way, we have a screen where they can actually see what's going on biometrically inside their body. And so we tell them, hey, next time you see the heart rate getting up, we want you to try this breathing technique. And that'll bring your heart rate down. It's going to make you, be able to steer through that corner a little bit faster. When you're before you get into that race, we want you to, we'll increase the intensity of the experience, and we'll tell them, hey, we need you to complete the next lap 30 seconds faster. So the next time you do it, first thing we want you to do is visualize a successful lap, but then we want you to get into the proper mindset. We're going to teach you how to breathe and how to relax so that when you come in, that heart rate's real low, so that even when it increases, it's still going to be below baseline. And so these are the kinds of things that we do with them. What we know kind of on the side is that once you can start to train your body that way, right? You and I do this, presumably quite effectively. We can manage our stress. We're inundated with stress all day long, and we'll naturally, without even thinking about it, be able to learn ways to regulate that stress. And that's essentially what we're trying to teach them, but we're doing it through this race car simulation experience. Once they start to master that, that's now where we come in. We actually have students from the psychology department that are interns that work with these individuals to start to now get them to transfer the skills and say, hey, you know how that worked here in that race car environment? You can actually use this at home. So when you're starting to feel stressed out at home, we want you to use those same techniques, and let's see how it works. And then they'll come back and report to us how it works. And at the same time, they're still coming back in because they're racing. Then when they come back in, they start to see other individuals that were engaged in racing. They start to kind of talk about that experience, and not only how they're doing in this simulated race car environment, but how those skills are transferring outside in real life. Now that they've had a chance to process that and kind of go through it with our skilled therapists that attack it that way, that they're very mindful of the fact that they don't want these veterans to feel as though they're quote unquote on the couch. They want to feel like it's more of a conversation where we're trying to, work with them in a different way, in a way that they've never experienced, to make them better. Long story short, in the preliminary data that we have, what are we finding? We're finding that stress levels are starting to decrease. We're finding that when these guys come in, not only in the race environment, when we throw stressful situations at them, are we seeing a dramatic decrease in their heart rate and their respiration rate, but they're reporting to us that the stress that they're experiencing in general has significantly decreased. Okay, so really, really positive and powerful findings that we've seen in that study. The next phase in this now is to develop a different type of treatment. One thing that we know is not everybody's going to be interested in racing cars. And so what we're going to do is a diving experience. And one thing about diving is a lot of these techniques are built into the process of diving. So regulating your breathing, regulating your heart rate. If you're if you're underwater and you're hyperventilating, you're going to run out of oxygen, right? You can't do that. And so we need to teach you those same exact type of skills. The monitoring, that biometric monitoring, is very simple to do. We have dive computers that they wear on their wrist that will look much like an Apple Watch, that regulate those things for the diver. This is all an integral part of it. So in diving, a lot of these types of skills they're part of the diving curriculum. And so in this project, guys will come in. We will teach them we'll give them the certification actually to be a diver. It'll take about a week for them to go through this. And it'll be a very similar process, a faster process. We'll be able to get them in and out in, like I said, in 5 sessions done consecutively. But we'll again teach them these skills in the context of diving, and then start to help them make the transition into, like, hey, you know how you were nervous to go diving? You know how you started to feel that anxiety? And you remember how you started to do those breathing techniques and everything got better and you're able to do it? That works now outside of diving as well. So that's really what we are trying to do. So the idea is, let's do something creative and unique. Let's not take the same old in terms of the therapeutic process, and let's design something that meets the mindset of these individuals. The second thing that I just want to make sure I do hit is in the question that you asked about on the assessment side. The things that really stood out to us were that there was a really fragmented picture of what anxiety and PTSD looked like in traditional measures. So a lot of the classical clinical scales, they do a good job of capturing things like that, hypervigilance and nightmares and avoidance. But what we wanted to do was look at more of the early warning signs. So things that you start to see prior to getting to that full-blown, PTSD. And we think that we've done a pretty good job of that. And what we're hoping is that getting at these guys a little earlier can now allow them to, to get through that process more effectively, never get through some of those full-blown PTSD experiences that we've had. And so we're actually working with different military agencies to try to get to these guys before they're even released and start to intervene there, like before they're even back home.
Right.
So just before they're discharged, to try to get them in the right mindset before they're back into to civilian life.
Great. I have a couple of questions. We have a lot of PhD students that are in here in the webinar, and so just for their purposes and sort of a teaching moment, if you will. You mentioned that men have a more difficult time. We know that there are women who are veterans also and suffer with PTSD as well. So is this sample exclusively men?
Right now it is, yeah, yeah. So in our initial pilot, so this was a pilot study that we've done, and the first phase of that, and this would be a teaching moment, is you have to prove that it works, right? Because we knew in our heads, we said we think it works. Now we have to prove it empirically, and so we found a group of 5 individuals to go through our pilot project, and that's where we've stood now. Now, once we start to blow it out, now's where we'll start to diversify the sample a little bit. So, because now we know it works, and so we'll be looking at different levels of severity in these in PTSD, and then looking at different ages, men and women. So that's where we'll start to get a better mix to see how does this seem to work.
Okay.
Is there length of discharge? So how long you've been out? Does this work, better for people that have just been out for a few months, or as compared to people that have been out for 20 years? So that's where we'll start to add those additional variables.
Okay. So the eligibility criteria, just so that we understand, did they have to have certain PTSD symptoms? Did they had to be in combat? Like, what was some of the eligibility criteria? And also, how did you get the sample of 5 for the
Yeah,
pilot?
so I'll answer that first. So that was, all due to the Veterans Trust. So they, that the partnership was very strategic on our part because they touch so many veterans. They're easy, kind of an easy point of us. They tell us we can get you as many as you want. They have access because of their backgrounds, not only to veterans in this community, but military bases across the country. So they got us onto Fort Bragg. Matt was there for a big event where they actually went and discussed, this implementing this process at, before these guys went back into civilian life. So that's kind of the level of connection that we have. So that's why we're keeping that partnership really tight. In terms of eligibility, we did rule out if you had really extreme PTSD, because what we didn't want is to have somebody sit down before we could even start that process, that the race car simulator could be a trigger for them. And one thing that
Right.
we knew is that for a lot of these guys, it being in that environment, especially if they'd been injured while doing some kind of drive, it is loud. There's kind of a lot going on in this racing environment. That would be a negative. And so what we wanted to see was at least some level of anxiety disorder, meeting some of the criteria for PTSD, not those to such an extent that this would be hugely problematic. Now,
Right.
the Veterans Trust has told us that they brought guys out that were essentially agoraphobic, guys that hadn't left their house in months, in some cases 18 months. And they've gotten them out and into the race car simulator and to kind of ease them into that environment in more of a social way, and that they think that we actually could be really effective in working with them. So we are interested in that. But again, the first step was, does this work? And early indications from our pilot are, yes, it does.
Sure. And so IRB approval, again, teaching moment, I'm talking to the PhD students right now. So the IRB process in terms of like checking off the beneficence issue, the cost to benefit ratio, and how do we do no harm, and how do we, we don't want to place our participants at risk. So the eligibility criteria being not on the extreme end of the scale for PTSD was something that's how you addressed that risk. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And then the other piece that really is a big deal, because it does show that we're onto something, is that we do have the lab where our race car simulator sits is now an authorized internship site for our clinical psych students at NSU. Now, that's a big deal because that needs to be approved and it needs to be, demonstrated that this is a location where real learning, in terms of understanding how to conduct therapy takes place. And so the fact that we got that there did two things. One is that in and of itself legitimized the modality is that this is something legit. But then the second thing it did from an RRB standpoint is put the same assurances in places that we have in our clinic because it's considered a clinic site. And
Right.
so we have, psychologists on staff. We have, God forbid somebody has a crisis. We have the mechanisms all in place, built into the clinic that can handle that.
Right. Hey, Matt, I'm going to bring you down if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about your experience on your end, either witnessing, part of, a participant, whatever. Tell us.
Well, I can tell you personally from my own experiences that when you're trying to convince or lead somebody to something like therapy, even when you clearly are encountering and engaging in like post-traumatic behaviors, sitting down with a counselor is not something many are interested in. But if you sit there and you provide them with an alternative means like a race car simulator, there's going to be a line out the door. And that therapy comes through that process of it. So honestly, it's been beautiful seeing not only just the race car simulator, but scuba. And I mean, even the VA has adopted a lot of different modalities to where they are providing options. It's not a one size fits all, which unfortunately was my experience when I got out and was seeking service. It was either individual or group, and neither of those really seemed like a good option. And now you go to the VA and it's almost like a laundry list of opportunities that exist out there. And this is coming through research and other nonprofits in the community showing success and showing the draw of the veteran being willing to come and stick with it for the duration of the therapy.
Excellent, excellent. So, from your perspective, you're sitting as an administrator of a resource center, but you're a veteran yourself, and so you're looking at this work with like sort of the two hats that you wear. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of having somebody with veteran or military background running the veteran and military office is not only is it something that I have a lot of pride in providing that to our students, to the next generation that's now getting out and the family members and all of that, but I can sit there and just ask myself, is this something that I would be interested in? Is the so what matter? Does it add up? Like, is there going to
Right.
be interest, or is it just a good idea that we're throwing around? And maybe there's a lot of initiatives that are put out there, but there's just no real emphasis or want for it. And this is one
Yes.
that was easy, and like if we had space, we'd be able to fill that space almost indefinitely with how many chairs available with the racing simulators. And I would be willing to bet that we'd be able to fill it up with veterans that are needing that therapy, but also interested and drawn in by the excitement of that race car simulator.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So, Dr. Mills, let me just finish up based on these findings, these preliminary findings, because it's a pilot, and then it'll expand, I'm sure. How should institutions like NSU or other universities or community agencies, for that matter, rethink early identification and support strategies for veterans experiencing PTSD?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think really our findings certainly do challenge the idea that PTSD is something that happens, that you identify after it becomes debilitating, and rather we're really focused in on those indicators. So looking at patterns of emotional regulation, looking at patterns of disturbed sleep, avoidance of community spaces. So these are all things that peers, that if as an institution, professors or others that we see, community mentors, that we can notice pretty quickly. And I think it's important for us to do that. So one of the biggest takeaways is that early identification doesn't have to be clinical. It can also be relational. So we can train educators or coaches or student mentors or whoever to recognize some of these behavioral flags, and then connect veterans to the support that they need in order to get the treatment that they want. So, I'd say that's the biggest thing. So the heart of our research The way that we think about it is that we're redefining healing not as symptom reduction, but as a reactivation of agency, of focus, and of community. And that when we approach it that way, that forces us then on kind of the treatment side to develop modalities that take all that into account, that it takes more of like a social ecological approach to this treatment.
Okay, excellent. Hey, Matt, I'm going to bring you in, okay? And Dr. Mills, please don't go anywhere. We're going to come back to you for sure. So, Matt, in your daily work with veteran students, what are some of the silent, I mean, that's like the title of this, silent wounds, but what are some of the silent or less visible challenges that you see these vets facing during their academic transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question and not always easy to identify because it's just that it's silent. But you get them open and talking and involved and engaged, and you learn a ton from it. And it's, I would say, in my opinion, and from what I'm hearing from our students and my work here at NSU, it's identity. You're coming from the military, which is a culture. When you look at it, you're seeing the norms, the language, the dress, the hierarchy, the structure, all of that. It's easy to look at it as a culture. And what happens when you leave that culture? For anybody that might have studied abroad or spent significant time outside the US, there's something called culture shock that you experience. And you look at it, and it's not just that culture, but it is ingrained from boot camp or through the officer selection process. Like, you are living that day in and day out, and it is really drilled into you. And you go from being in it, completely submersed in it, and then you're just out. And you're trying to figure out this new environment with new, no, with new norms and language and expectations. And it's a lot. It's a lot. And you're coming into higher education as a non-traditional student. A lot of our military members are coming here to NSU as at graduate and professional level. So now they're balancing having a family that's culture shock, and then also the academic rigors that are coming on. And don't get me wrong, a lot of military is difficult and it's mentally demanding along with the physicality as well. But it's also very much a transition into that classroom setting and the test setting. There's a lot of that in the military, but it's very still just different from what they are used to. So it's difficult to really navigate that for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I actually met. I think that we may have met before the 20-year anniversary, but we really got to know each other during that piece. And so that I was a first responder at Ground Zero for a year and a half, and like during the work, it didn't affect me. While I was doing the work was like life and death. It felt like it was like really meaningful. It was so valuable. It wasn't until I retired in 2003 that the silent wounds started to manifest. And a lot of it was because of the identity piece, I think, being in this high pressure, life and death kind of situation, very special, unique. You're talking about culture, special culture. I mean, even the culture of not just policing culture, but then this 9/11 culture that happened. That was a subculture, so that everybody that was working down at Ground Zero felt part of something that even maybe other cops weren't a part of, like that maybe they were directing traffic, but we were down we were down there in the pit kind of thing. So I get what you're saying completely about this identity piece that I think is the thing that really sparks the silent wounds, because you're so far away from it. And like nothing, and I'll close with this, nothing seems to match that work. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care how important it is. I don't care how exciting it is. And I also like kind of like know from myself, and my boss is probably going to agree that I'm an overachiever. But I think it's because I can't sit still. And I think I can't sit still because of the 9/11 stuff. I think that's what it's connected to. So, I mean, can you identify with anything that I'm saying here? And then I have a follow-up question about what our institution can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point too, is, and I mean, I hear our students say it now, just like tongue in cheek, like trauma bonding, but you go through things with a group of people and you're bonded, you're connected with this group forever. And, the first responders will also experience the same thing is when you're together, you went through something. It's almost like an unspoken support to each other and you're looking out for each other's backs. But sometimes you retire, you might stay close to that community, but for the military, most of the time, you're not staying where you were located. You're not staying near that base. You're going back home, or you're moving across the country to pursue an academic degree to start that next journey in life. And I think what many of our veterans are not focusing on is not just what am I going to do next to fill that time, but that purpose. I shared in the speech that I shared or gave at the Veterans Day celebration is I was looking to join the military. I was looking for challenge and purpose. And, afterwards I got out and I was looking for a challenge, and going to college was challenging enough. But what I was really having difficulty finding was purpose. I was finding things to do to fill that time, the restlessness that you were just referring to. Like, I didn't know how to be bored, and I still have trouble with that. But where can I really direct my time and my energy to where I also feel like I'm still providing? Like, I joined the Marines to serve my country, to protect my family, to do something noble and worthwhile. The quote of I want my children to enjoy the shade of the tree that I planted and I'll never see. Like, that's the idea behind it. Like, you want to still do things that matter. And that is often one of the first things that I'll share with our students if they're coming to us and saying that they're struggling. It's often not an easy solution of just, oh, like, I'm having trouble in my chemistry class. Okay, let's get a chemistry tutor. It's much more on that personal level of you need to find your community. You need to find
Yes.
that group that is next. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just a veterans group. If you're passionate about photography, go find some students that are also interested in photography. And that military identity is something that you can bring to the table to really benefit our community as a whole. I don't want our veterans just to isolate with other veterans. I think that's really restricting the full potential of what they're able to bring the larger community. But they're going to have to do some searching to find what is that is going to really fulfill them when they go to bed at night, knowing that they are still contributing to those that are around them.
Yeah, I love that. Making meaning of their work and finding their purpose. That's perfect. So what steps can institutions like us, like ours, like NSU take to better align their resources, policies, and everyday support with both the realities that were highlighted in Dr. Mill's research and the lived experiences of our veterans?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I came to NSU back in 2018, I was the first full-time staff member to take charge of what was then just the Veterans Resource Center. It was a place on campus. I compared it to like a USO. You go to any major airport, there's a USO, but I guarantee it, you don't know where it is. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. You have to search for it to find it and then to go there. And that's what this space was initially, but it was a space that we had, and we've been able to really grow and develop it from there. But coming in, I realized I came to a perfect situation. I had a group of veterans that had built that camaraderie, and they were looking for what is that next step? Like, we're here, we're together, we're enjoying this space, but what's next? And it was that purpose. And really looking across the university, I wanted to go and do an inventory. What else was the university doing for our veteran and military connected populations? And it was a lot. It was just looking to see. We had a lot of silos where things were going on, but there wasn't connectivity between them. So that was one of the big things with turning the Veteran Resource Center into NSU Military Affairs was coordinating, communicating, making sure that the left hand was talking to the right hand and the left foot was talking to the right foot. Like, it was all coordinated together so that we could be running in the same direction and really collaborating and making sure that when we have a student come to our Veteran Resource Center, I have that laundry list of resources and services. And I'll say this too, it is not just limited. We are beyond lucky to have a university that realizes that we're looking at the whole student, the whole veteran, and that family member again, because we include that in our umbrella in the larger circle. We're not just looking at their academic success. Of course, that's a priority. We are a university. We want them to come here and receive those degrees and then go and be successful. But we also recognize that there's more to it than that. So we partner across the university, but in the community as well. We want to make sure that we know where the United Way of Broward County Mission Uniteds are, the Veterans Trust that is our partner in the race car simulation therapy. But then you also look at the Veterans Administration. We partner with them for the Gulf War illness through the Institute of Neuroimmune Science that Dr. Klimas is running. And then on top of it, our NSU Health Veterans Care Clinic is providing not only to the veteran, but that legal dependent and spouse free access to NSU's own clinics for audiology, dental, optometry. Now we've got PT, OT, and speech language pathology that is being provided to our community, not just our NSU veterans and family members, but our community at no cost. So we benefited NSU being able to see that big picture and making sure that we are filling a void that exists out there to make sure that these people are successful and flourishing, because that's going to make our entire community better and stronger.
Excellent, excellent. So you just kind of gave us a little bit of a laundry list of some of the resources. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned yet as to what are the opportunities for our veterans? I mean, I know that there's I believe that there's the Valor Award for them. But why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the other opportunities and resources that are there for our vets?
Absolutely. And there's three that I'd really like to highlight. The first one is just our physical space that we have in the Carl DeSantis building. That is our NSU Military Affairs Veteran Resource Center. The Veteran Resource Center is that physical space right next to Einstein Bagels, and that's open to everybody. So anybody that's on here today watching or watching later, we invite you to come in. That is not restrictive to just our veteran and military populations. This is inclusive to everybody. It is a place to where we want them to be able to come in and transition and get embedded into our larger community. The two other ones I'd like to highlight, the first is off of that Valor Award. When I looked around the university, I realized colleges like the College of Criminal Justice Fishler, they were already providing a discount. But then I also looked over the College of Business was providing a discount. And then there are some other programs here and there were providing a discount. But again, we weren't talking to each other. They were just very much siloed into those colleges that you only found out about it if somehow you talked to the right person that was aware of it. We wanted to bring it all together and we put it into a basket that we call our Military Affairs Academic Program. It's just a collection. And now, because of, again, our supportive administration, this is extended to all of our master's degree programs. You will receive a discount as a veteran or legal dependent or spouse. So that is an incredible benefit, especially when you think the GI Bill has a limited amount of eligibility. You get 36 months of it. After that, you're on your own. So when we're looking at our students that are continuing their education, this is a great opportunity. And the last one that I'll just finish with, looking at NSU, we are predominantly a medical and healthcare institution. We're producing the most physicians in Florida. We're one of only 3 universities across the country that has DO, MD, and dental. We're now R1. We're doing all of these things. So why don't we recruit our military members that are serving as corpsmen, as medics, as lab techs, or just in the military thinking, I want to find my next career and purpose in healthcare. And I think it is such a noble area of that healthcare. And I'll include College of Psychology as well, our mental health practitioners, that is a noble calling in an area that is needed, that you're going to find purpose in. Let's go intentionally recruit them. And we're going to provide the pathway, that one-on-one assistance to let them know, how do you stack all of your cards in a deck to make sure when you apply here, it's a golden ticket. You're already ready to go. You just have to go and work on that interview, which we partner with NSU Pre-Health, Emilio Lorenzo and their team, to help cultivate these candidates to make sure that they are polished when they get in front of those boards. But we are going through and taking that time to make sure that they are prepared to come in and expedite that process, hopefully into many of our medical fields, including the College of Psychology as well.
I love it. And also, the School of Criminal Justice, hopefully, is the leader in first responders, right?
Absolutely.
First responders of the future, and the chiefs of police of the future, and also a noble profession, right? And also teachers. Let's not
Mhm.
forget, right? The College of Education, we put out a lot of really great teachers, and another noble profession. So, like
Mhm.
finding purpose, I'm not, and I totally underscore, highlight, and applaud everything that you just said, Matt, 100%. Like all of these can give someone
Mhm.
purpose in whatever their career is going to be. So I applaud you. I honor you. Thank you for all that you do in saving lives, and I really do believe that you do that. And thank you, Dr. Mills, so much for your research. It sounds fascinating. As a scuba diver, I can really appreciate how when you're at the surface, you're feeling that you're sort of feeling that anxious feeling, it's especially if you're diving in New York City. So where I have where the visibility is zero, and there's a lot of anxiety. Oh my gosh, you say, how could this make me feel better? But as soon as you get some depth and you go deep, deep, deep down, it's a stillness. And like that's also sort of a lesson in, what do I do with my anxiety? What do I do with this feeling that I'm having of fear, let's say, to go deep within to gain some, you sort of gain some perspective in that way where the stillness, and you say, okay, all of that stuff that was happening on the surface isn't really real. I go deep down, and then I can feel the stillness. So I think it's a really great metaphor and a really great therapeutic modality for sure. Anything else you want to say, Dana? Kind of like to piggyback off of Matt before I get into the questions from our participants.
Yeah, no, just to reinforce something that Matt, excuse me, did say, which is the none of this would happen without the support of administration, and this really goes back to President Ferrero, um, obviously with President Hanbury as well, and now with President Moon. And a lot of what we're seeing today really can be spearheaded by the Vice President for Advancement and Community Relations, Mr. Terry Malarkey, who is a veteran himself, who makes a lot of comments to us like, "Hey, if you get the money, get the resources that you need, and we'll do whatever we need to do to make this happen." So he's been incredibly supportive. So I think, to kind of answer your question, you see all these little pieces that are in place, but if you don't have that administration that will shepherd this forward, it's just not going to happen. We just received a $6 million state budget allocation, thanks to a lot of work from a whole variety of academics inside, even some of our lobbyists in Tallahassee pushing forward to help make sure that we got that allocation to support a lot of those services that Matt talked about. So there's so much going on here. It just wouldn't be happening if we didn't have that administrative support. We could have all the best ideas in the world, and nothing would come of it. So I'm very excited about the future. I think that we've started to really make a dent in the community as being seen as a resource for veterans, and it's sky's really the limit. And we're fortunate to have Matt on the ground there spearheading it, and as you can see, he does a very good job and representing us and letting everybody know what we do very well here.
100%. So there's a statement I'm just going to make from Josh Blotzer. He says, this isn't a question, but Brett Moore and Carrie Kennedy have written some interesting books addressing military psychology, and he believes that they're also involved with the APA's Division 19, Society for Military Psychology. I don't know if that's something that you probably already are aware of that, but maybe our audience doesn't know that. So here's Rachel Yates has a question. How should we think about these silent wounds in the context of veteran reintegration and civilian life transitions? And what are the implications for families and employers or communities that you're seeing? Which one of you wants to answer that?
I'll let Matt actually, because Matt shared with me what reintegration means today from on the military side, and it's not great. And I think we are starting to see some change there. I think that there is a mindset that's starting to be adopted within the military that we do need to do a better job of this. But I know he helped enlighten me answering some of that, so I'll defer to him for that one.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. And really, I think about it, it's like when you're driving on the highway, you're doing 80 miles an hour and you get very used to going 80 miles an hour. Then you pull off the highway, you take that exit ramp and you're on a regular road and you're restricted to doing 25 miles an hour. And it is painful to slow down the tempo of your drive and just trying to get where you're going. You were just doing 80 miles an hour, winds in your hair when you had it. I mean, mine's been gone a long time now. Dana, I guess we're sharing that. But but that slowdown is very difficult, and it's not just limited to that service member. You think about the family member, somebody that did 20 years of service. They probably have a couple kids. They've gone through countless different moves, deployments. That reintegration isn't just leaving the military and going back to the civilian world. A lot of times you see a lot of marital trouble come up when that service member is now home full time. The other partner has become very used to them coming in, being around for a few days and going off on training, coming back for a few more days, maybe a few weeks, going off on training, that they develop their own patterns and their own way of living and raising their kids. That the other partner comes back and now all of a sudden it's like, wait, you're really throwing a wrench into the gears. So you have to look at the whole family, because as they are transitioning back together, but then also civilian life in that next step, like we're just multiplying the amount of culture shock that is going on in that. So taking that intentional look of the entire family and how do we make sure that they're all equally as supported. And again, you look at some of the programs that we have available through that NSU Health $6 million grant that we received from the state of Florida. We have family therapy that's available for those families that are getting out and might need just some professional assistance in navigating that next step in life.
Yeah, perfect. So here's Ariana Lopez says, this is super cool, everything that's being discussed. But what if someone literally just wants the simulator and doesn't really care about the therapy? Is there a part of this where it's like we're okay with just being social and not necessarily therapeutic for everyone? Dana, you want to comment?
Yeah, so the Veterans Trust actually does they do events where they will show up with their simulator for that purpose, and they actually have one of their simulators is it's a NASCAR. So when you see it, you're like, oh, there's a NASCAR here. When you get inside, it's actually built out to be a simulator embedded within the car, and they'll bring it on road shows for that very reason, to give people that experience. And now it does serve multiple purposes. One is that it's cool and it's fun, and they just want people to kind of get to interact with it so that they do go back. And so while their outcome is we really want people to to establish this as kind of a treatment modality. Certainly when they started, this is a way to bring people in, and it's something fun. And if you do ask them, like, what if you were to ask the Veterans Trust, like, what's your vision? They would say that we would have these race car simulators in college campuses all over the country. They would all be attached to Veterans Resource Centers where people can just come in and kind of play around. With us right now, we don't have the luxury of doing that because we're using it, right? So if we did, if we have any, Bill Gates, if you're on here tonight, or any other rich philanthropist, you give us some money and we'll build a whole room full of simulators, and we'll have a whole bunch of them set up for people to come in and just hang out. But again, unfortunately now it's difficult to get into that room just to take some pictures because we're using it. I mean, it's busy all the time.
Dana, you really think that Bill Gates is watching Investigation with Dr. T?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's possible. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here's a question based on your findings. This goes back to you, Dana, from Brittany. Based on your findings, which specific factors most strongly predict whether a vet will seek treatment for PTSD, and how might policymakers or clinicians use the information to reduce barriers to care?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are a couple. A lot of the times though, it is this. When Matt talks about that, that kind of that level of engagement that you need and that purpose that you need, and a lot of times it does come to that once they start to feel like, hey, this is affecting my purpose. That's when it's time to get in. That's usually the number one way that we know we're going to get them engaged, when they see that there's something more that they're missing, and that purpose could be something occupational, could be their role as a father. There's a lot of different reasons for that. The challenge for us is, how do we find those that haven't identified that purpose, the ones that are not coming out of their house, the ones that really are truly living in that silence. And that's when bad things happen to them, and they're obviously by definition a difficult population to reach because they're not getting out. And I know some of the Veterans Trust guys that I've spoken to talk a lot about that a lot of what they try to do is just get people out. And once they come out, then you can start to instill some of that purpose. And so, kind of going back to that earlier question of like, could we just play around with one of these things? I think part of it is we do want them to do some of that. We want them to get them out in an area, even if it's to use these health services that Matt talked about. I think that's why that is so important. Look, people get sick, people need glasses, people need a hearing aid, people need to go to, and have dental work done, knowing it can be done for free. Once we get them out and we get them here, now we can start to work. And now we can potentially pull them in. So as he said, I think it's the coordination of all of this that really needs to be done so that we can effectively manage those that are difficult to reach.
So Juanita asks, and I have two more questions, and then we're gonna close it up. But Juanita asks, how do vets perceive the effectiveness of mental health therapy to manage these challenges, the challenges of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and reintegration? So how are they perceiving the effectiveness of the mental health therapy?
Yeah, so that's one of the most striking things with us is that they are recognizing that it's done something. And the best, kind of like anecdotal story that we've heard was one of the guys in our project that showed up to a session and said, I was bringing my kids to school today and I started freaking out in the back seat of my truck. And that normally means this is going to be a bad day. Like, I'm going to have to go back there and yell and scream. And he's like, I just found that it didn't really bother me and I couldn't understand why. We were just like, whoa. And so, and he even said, hey, I started doing that box breathing and I was like ready to go. And so we were like, wow, big, huge, like, light bulb went off in his head, which is exactly what we want. And so they are recognizing it. And once we kind of get them in that process and start to show them like, hey, you've changed. And you can see it. You can see it in what you've done on this track in this kind of fun way. But the things that we've done to you, in the same way that you didn't choose to have anxiety and all of these things that go along with it, we've helped rewire you now, whether you like it or not. Like, and now that, now you may not even have made the choice, but it's starting to work, that we have started to rework those neural circuits in such a way that it's starting to go away. And They start to recognize that. And that's very powerful.
So we've come to the end, but before we do end, I want to bring somebody on. His name is Dr. Matthew Goodnow. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. There he is. I'm going to turn it over to you for a second here. Let me just get him spotlit. There he is. Okay. Matt, take it away. What do you have to say to Dr. Goodnow, and what's something's very special that happened to him this week?
Well, first of all, go ahead, Matt.
Do you want me to give the program overview, or Dr. Goodnow to dive in on what he experienced? I'll let you pick, Dr.
Oh, go ahead, Matt. What were you going to say? Because I would like Matthew to, kind of like tell us what the presentation was about.
Certainly. So each year, and this is a ceremony that we've been doing since I started in 2018, so 7 years now, to where it's a Veterans Day celebration. Veterans Day is always on November 11th. So each November 11th at 11 a.m. Historically, it's for Armistice Day at the end of World War I. Pretty cool history, but we'll host a Veterans Day celebration to where we invite our students, faculty, staff, alumni, and our cadets to come out and be celebrated. And this is an event that's open to our entire NSU community to come and attend. Well, each year we've also added a nice recognition ceremony to where we open up for nominations across the board. We put flyers all over campus, the TV screens. I'm sure each of you saw it in emails, digital, like all over the place. And it was amazing. The first year we did it, we weren't sure if there's going to be a lot of response. I'm sure you all see the surveys. Please respond. How many people actually respond? It's usually pretty low. We actually were alarmed. We had something like 150 people respond to it, and nominating all types of people, student, faculty, staff, alumni, and really showing that they are continuing their service. not just being a service member and a veteran, which is amazing, but they're continuing to provide added value to our NSU community. So we were like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to recognize the one that stands out from each category at this ceremony every single year. So we had the pleasure of connecting with Dr. Goodnow. We had not previously connected before, but I think you're going to forever be within our circle now as our alumni veteran awardee from this past year. So we brought him up on stage, of course, invited his whole family to come out as well. We presented Dr. Goodnow with a coin, a certification or a certificate, and then probably the icing on the cake, which unfortunately looked like the blur in the background kind of blurred it out. We give him one of our VRC coins, which in the military, a coin is something that is given to somebody that is going above and beyond. So we give them out. But on top of that, he was presented one from Dr. Moon, which Dr. Moon, if you look on the side of that coin, Dr. Goodnow, it's really small, but go ahead and read that number off once you find it, because they are in limited release. We do not make many of them, and Dr. Moon has only select people that he gives it out to, and this is one area that he's decided is deserving of awarding a coin.
76.
76. So.
I can't tell you how jealous I am right now, but go ahead, Matt. Tell us what it was like for you.
No, it was awesome. I honestly, I found out about it about a week and a half before, and I kept sending emails like, "What is this? You know, can I bring my family?" And I wasn't sure what the presentation was, and I got there with my family, and I just walked up to Matt and I said, "Hey, my name's Matt." He goes, "Oh, you're Matt Goodnow. You're getting the alumni award." And I was just blown away that, number one, he even knew the program, but number two, I didn't know I had won anything. I just thought I was there for the Veterans Day celebration. So thank you to the Military Affairs Veteran Resource Center, Matt, Dr. Mills, for everything you do. And if I could take 20 seconds of your show, Dr. T, I'm part of that population that will do everything to avoid talking to a psychologist, even though that I know I have some hidden trauma. So what Dr. Mills and Matt are discussing here, it's extremely important, beneficial. And, the most challenging part of PTSD is that most people don't realize they're struggling with it until the damage is already done. So I would urge, people to take part in this. This sounds something like what I would come out of my house to do. But most of my trauma is unfortunately from law enforcement profession. But I think I would urge high-risk professions to also implement these resiliency programs, because these aren't just programs; they're lifelines for a lot of these heroes. So, but thank you guys for what you do.
And thank you for being on the show tonight and allowing us to honor you in this way. And for those who have been watching all along this season, that Dr. Goodnow was actually on a few weeks ago with Chief Kinsey when we were talking about his research. So Dr. Goodnow is not only a veteran, but he's also a PhD in criminal justice from the School of Criminal Justice from Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice program, and also teaching for us now. So applause all around. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. And I also benefited from that military discount, so thank you.
Yes. And you also benefited from my mentorship.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
Grace, if I may very quickly,
please.
Probably the icing on the cake for myself was at the end of the ceremony, I got a coin too. I got this brand new coin from Dr. Goodnow in the department that he works with. So the coin exchange is definitely rich in military history. There's a lot of different myths of how far back it goes, but it's one that's alive and well now, and it's displayed prominently in my office. So it's a great community to be a part of, and it's even better when we're here to support each other.
Well, you guys are killing me. I have coin envy like you can't believe. My head is like
and those two
exploding.
have a serial number on it, so you got to find it.
Okay.
If I find them at a pawn shop, I know where to go.
I do think that I got one from you, Matt, right? And I think that also got one from you, Matt C. You gave me one too, but I have not gotten Dr. Moon's. And so that's going to be something that we're going to have to try to get me. Okay.
I'll
If
see
we
what
can,
we can do.
try to see if we can maneuver that. All right. Listen, I want to thank you, all of you, for being here with me tonight, sharing your expertise and your heart. During Veterans Week, we're reminded that honoring service means more than just words. It means understanding, supporting, and advocating for the well-being of those who served to protect us and to protect our country. To our veterans who are listening and to the families who stand beside them, we see you, we appreciate you, we're grateful for you. And to everyone joining us, thank you for being part of this important dialogue. So I'm Dr. Grace Telesco. This is Investigation with Dr. T. Stay safe, stay compassionate, and continue to lift up our veteran community, not just this week, but all of the weeks of the year. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for being here.